They called it just business, until it backfired. In this compilation, ruthless bosses pushed too far, and their most underestimated employees pushed back. This is workplace karma, bosses who got owned. Let's get into it.
My boss fired me for being pregnant, so I made her regret it. You want to know how to really hurt a bad boss? Not by yelling. Not by fighting. Not by begging for respect she never planned to give you. You hit her where it hurts most. Her reputation. My boss fired me because I got pregnant. Didn't say it out loud, of course. She was too smart for that. Too corporate. Too polished. But the second I told Vanessa I was expecting, everything changed. Suddenly my projects were getting reassigned. My hours were under review. Meetings I used to lead? Gone. Raises I'd earned? Postponed. Then one day, just like that, a termination letter in my inbox. No warning. No thank you for your hard work. Just, we've decided to go in a different direction. Cute. Real cute. But what Vanessa didn't know was that I knew my rights. I knew my worth. And most importantly, I knew her reputation meant more to her than any employee ever would. So no, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't fall apart. I went quiet, collected receipts, screenshots, emails, documentation of every shady move she made after I told her I was pregnant. Then, I went public. Not messy, not loud, just the truth. Posted perfectly, shared widely. And Vanessa? She didn't just lose me. She lost everything. My name's Jade, project coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm. Nothing fancy, nothing flashy, but I was good at my job. Really good. Organized. Reliable. A little too available. First one in, last one out. You know the type. The work wife of the department. The one everyone came to when they needed things done right, and done quietly. Vanessa? She was my boss for almost 2 years. Vice President of Operations. All heels in power suits. Smooth-talking, LinkedIn-obsessed, girl boss energy. Everybody loved her. At least on the outside. Me? I didn't just work for Vanessa. I protected Vanessa. Ran interference when clients were mad. Cleaned up after her messy deadlines. Finished reports at midnight when she forgot to send me details until 9 p.m. The whole deal. And for a long time, I didn't mind. Because in my head, that's just corporate life. Pay your dues. Earn your stripes. Eventually get promoted. And Vanessa pretended to care. She'd say things like, "You're my right hand, Jade. Couldn't survive without you. Stick with me, big things coming for you." So I stuck. I worked hard. I stayed loyal. Even when the cracks showed. Even when raises got delayed. Even when she took credit for ideas I wrote in Slack 3 weeks earlier. Because part of me thought, that's just how the game is played. Until I got pregnant. And suddenly, the rules changed. Fast. Funny how fast your success becomes a burden when a powerful woman thinks she owns you. Funny how someone who called me family started treating me like a liability overnight. No congratulations. No support. Just a new, colder version of Vanessa. And me. I noticed. Didn't say anything. Didn't rock the boat. Because women like her, they forget one thing. Quiet employees? We don't explode. We evolve. We document. We wait. Before I knew, I loved my job. Loved the pace. Loved the people. Loved the fact that I had finally found a role where I felt like I mattered. Vanessa used to call me her secret weapon. Nobody handles chaos like Jade. You're a machine. She'd brag about me in meetings. Drop compliments like candy. Send me random appreciation emails, CC'd to HR of course, about how I was essential to the team. And me, I believed her. Because I was raised to think that if you worked hard, stayed humble, and kept your head down, good things would happen. Raises, promotions, respect, opportunities. That's what I thought was coming next. I wasn't just working. I was building a future. Planning to start a family with my boyfriend. Saving for a new apartment. Looking at maternity leave policies like maybe, just maybe, I could have it all. Work life. Mom life. Balance. But that was before Vanessa showed me who she really was. The cracks started small. Passive-aggressive comments. Hope you can keep up when baby brain kicks in. Reassigning major projects without telling me. Leaving me off emails. Pushing me out of client meetings I used to run solo. When I asked, she smiled like a shark. Just trying to lighten your load before maternity leave, Jade. Translation? Trying to erase you before you even leave. But the biggest shift came in my performance reviews. Suddenly I went from rock star to lax leadership initiative. From can handle anything to may struggle with upcoming responsibilities. All within a month of announcing my pregnancy. Imagine that. And I realized, this wasn't about my work. This wasn't about my attitude. This was about me being pregnant, being inconvenient, being untouchable in her eyes. She couldn't say it outright, but she didn't have to. Her actions told me everything. So I went quiet, went still, went into full-on documentation mode. Because Vanessa? She didn't fire me that day. But trust me, she had already lost me. The first real red flag was a meeting that used to be mine. Weekly strategy session with our biggest client. Vanessa sent the invite out like normal, but left me off. Completely. I found out about it because a junior associate, bless her heart, forwarded me the notes after. Thought you might need these since you usually lead these calls. Ouch. No warning. No explanation. Just gone. Red flag number 2. Access revoked. Documents I built from scratch? Locked. Systems I had admin access to for 2 years? Suddenly IT error. But only for me. Funny how tech problems only show up after you announce a pregnancy. Red flag number 3. Performance concerns started popping up like weeds. She called me into a one-on-one. We just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed with everything you have going on personally. Translation? You're pregnant and we're about to ice you out. Oh, and this line. Chef's kiss. The team has noticed you've been less available lately. Less available? I was working through morning sickness like a soldier. Logging in at 7 a.m. Answering emails faster than Vanessa even read them. But sure, let's pretend I was slacking. But the red flag that ended it for me came from HR. After my review magically dropped me from exceeds expectations to needs improvement overnight. HR rep pulled me aside privately, lowered her voice. Off the record, document everything. If things escalate, you're going to need proof. That was all I needed to hear. From that moment on, every email, every text, every Slack message, screenshotted, saved, backed up. I made copies of every performance review, every client thank you, every KPI I crushed. Because if Vanessa thought firing me was going to be easy, she was about to learn the hard way. Pregnancy wasn't my weakness. It was my witness. And every shady move she made built my case higher. Quiet revenge is my love language. And baby, I was about to write poetry. Vanessa really thought she was untouchable. She thought HR was hers. She thought reputation mattered more than legality. And worst of all, she thought I was the kind of woman who didn't know her rights. Big mistake. Huge. Because while she was busy crafting this perfect little Jade's performance is slipping narrative, I was crafting a file. A beautiful, color-coded, time-stamped masterpiece of proof. Emails where I asked for clarity on assignments, ignored. Slack messages where I offered to pick up extra work, dismissed. Documentation of meetings I was left off of. Every single deliverable I completed ahead of schedule. Client emails saying, "Thank you so much, Jade, you always make things easier." That's not performance issues, sweetheart. That's receipts. Meanwhile, Vanessa got sloppy. Because arrogant people always do when they think they've already won. She made comments in meetings like, "We just need someone fully present in this role. I don't want to overload Jade while she's dealing with her situation." Her situation? You mean my pregnancy? Say less. Literally. And then it happened. The meeting invite with the subject line that said it all. Organizational changes discussion. A meeting I didn't request. A meeting only I was invited to. A meeting with HR and Vanessa. Termination meeting disguised as a restructuring conversation. The email was cold. Legal sounding. Empty. Like we hadn't spent 2 years building this department side by side. And me. I didn't flinch. Didn't beg. Didn't cry. Because I already had everything I needed. The day of the meeting, Vanessa clicked into the Zoom call like she was about to own me. About to deliver her little speech. Cut me loose clean. Quiet. Unbothered. Except what she didn't know was that by the time she fired me, I'd already spoken to a lawyer. Already filed a complaint. Already had screenshots saved in triplicate. Already knew exactly how I was going to hit her. Right where it would hurt most. Not her wallet. Not the company. Her reputation. The day of the meeting, I was calm. Scary calm. Vanessa clicked into Zoom like she'd won. Fake professional smile. HR rep sitting quietly in the corner of the screen. Looking more uncomfortable than anyone should in a standard restructuring meeting. Vanessa started with small talk. "How are you feeling these days, Jade?" Translation? "Let me pretend I care before I cut you loose." Cute. Really cute. Then came the speech. Corporate poetry. Words like business needs, realignment, resource optimization. I've heard enough true crime podcasts to know when somebody's trying to clean up a crime scene mid-sentence. And then, unfortunately, your role is being eliminated effective immediately. There it was. No severance. No offer of reassignment. Just bye. Because I was pregnant. Because I was inconvenient. Because she thought I wouldn't fight back. But me? I smiled. I really smiled. Because I had everything. I waited for her to finish. Waited for HR to nod like this was all above board. And then I dropped my favorite sentence I've ever spoken in a work setting. Thank you for clarifying that, Vanessa. Just so I'm clear, after I informed you I was pregnant, I was removed from client meetings, stripped of assignments, and told, in writing, that my pregnancy was impacting my performance, correct? Vanessa's face? Priceless. Eyes wide. Color draining. HR stiffened like she'd just seen a ghost. Because my legal counsel advised me to document everything. And I just want to make sure I'm summarizing it properly before I file with the EOC. Silence. Dead. Awkward. Silent. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't threaten. Didn't curse. Just stated facts. Just made it clear that this wasn't a regular firing. This was discrimination. And baby, I had receipts for days. Vanessa stammered something about misunderstandings and internal policies. HR looked like she wanted to melt through the floor. Me, I left that meeting smiling harder than I had in months. Because the revenge was already in motion, and I hadn't even posted yet. After that call, I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't vent online like some bitter ex-employee. Nah, that's not my style. Women like me, we move like storms. Quiet, unstoppable, and we love timing more than anything. Step 1. My lawyer filed the EEOC complaint the same day, with every receipt attached. Timeline, screenshots, emails, Slacks, meeting invites that forgot to include me after I shared my pregnancy news. It was flawless, surgical, HR-grade excellence. They were going to have fun explaining that to corporate. Step 2, LinkedIn. Oh yes, because while Vanessa was out here thinking this was a private matter, I knew better. Vanessa loved image, loved her personal brand, loved being the Women in Leadership keynote speaker, the panel guest for How to Build Inclusive Teams, the girl boss advocate for Empowering Working Women, the audacity. So I drafted a post. Not messy, not aggressive, just honest, just me. This week I was terminated from a company I've dedicated years to, shortly after announcing my pregnancy. My performance metrics remained strong, but my role was suddenly eliminated. To every working woman navigating corporate politics while building a family, this is why documentation matters. This is why knowing your rights matters. And to leaders who preach inclusion but practice exclusion, I see you, and so does everyone else. No names, no tags, just truth, undeniable, undistorted. And once I hit post, the internet handled the rest. Step 3, screenshots from other women, DMs, emails, old employees with similar stories about Vanessa. Pattern, proof. Whispers turned into full-volume conversations. And the comments? Oh, they were gold. This story feels way too familiar. Sending you love and screenshots. Funny how certain leaders talk about women empowerment until you're pregnant. Vanessa thought she fired a liability. She actually promoted me to the position of her worst nightmare. A woman with proof. And a voice. When I tell you that post moved, it moved like fire through dry grass. I expected support from friends. Maybe a few likes from old coworkers. What I didn't expect was how many women had a Vanessa story. Within an hour, hundreds of likes, dozens of shares. And then, the DM flood began. Anonymous. Quiet. Respectful. But deadly. I used to work for her too. Same thing happened to me when I got pregnant. She told me I wasn't leadership material after my maternity leave. I left because of her exact toxic energy. Women who were too scared to speak up then weren't scared anymore. Because nothing emboldens people like watching someone else say, enough. Meanwhile, Vanessa went radio silent. Not a post. Not a comment. Not a quote graphic in sight. Her LinkedIn suddenly real quiet for a woman who usually posted Motivation Monday, like it was her personal holiday. Love that for me. But you know who wasn't silent? Other leaders. Other women in leadership. CEOs. HR managers. Recruiters. All commenting things like, this is unacceptable in 2025. If you're hiring, Jade is the kind of talent we need more of. Pregnancy is not a performance issue. Vanessa's company had to make a statement. Oh yes, they dropped a lovely little "we take these claims very seriously" PR post. Translation? We got caught. And trust me, they were taking it seriously. Because my lawyer was already in contact, already setting meetings, already letting them know this wasn't just a LinkedIn post. This was a case. But me? I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even petty. I was focused, clear, unbothered. Because I didn't need to destroy Vanessa. I didn't have to. She handed me everything I needed. On company letterhead. All I did, held up the mirror, and let the world see for themselves. The best revenge is when you don't even have to say another word. Because the world starts talking for you. Loudly, relentlessly, accurately. Vanessa? She thought firing me would be simple. Quiet, effortless, corporate neat. But me? I played a different game. Documentation, patience, strategy. Days after my post went viral, I got a message from someone in corporate leadership. Not HR, not some entry-level employee. Senior level, big title energy. We'd love to speak with you directly. Oh, I bet you would. They weren't reaching out because they cared. They were reaching out because they were panicking. Because suddenly, their VP of operations wasn't an asset. She was a liability. And they had receipts floating all over LinkedIn to prove it. Screenshots, DMs, stories stacking like unpaid invoices. A pattern they could no longer pretend didn't exist. Vanessa's worst nightmare wasn't me screaming. It was me sitting still, posting once, and letting her mess spiral all on its own. Meanwhile, I was booked and busy. Recruiters hitting my inbox like, "We have a remote project lead role available. Interested? Your professionalism handling this is exactly what we look for. We'd love to have you speak to our women's leadership team." Wild how that works. And Vanessa? Rumor had it she went on leave. The pretty corporate phrase for girl, "Go sit down before we fire you too." Her profile stayed quiet. Her usual daily boss babe posts? Gone. The speaking gig she loved so much? Cancelled. Public image? Cracked. Me. I never responded to her directly. Didn't call her out by name. Didn't subtweet her life into dust. Because when you play dirty, you expect war. But when you play silent, people never see it coming. And nothing haunts them longer. Weeks after that post, I was good. Better than good. Because this was bigger than Vanessa. It was about me. About every woman who stayed quiet because she thought professionalism meant silence. Spoiler alert, professionalism doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Professionalism doesn't mean shrinking. Professionalism means receipts, grace, power, and knowing exactly when to hit post. Vanessa? Oh, she was still quiet. Last I heard, HR was investigating internally. Translation? Damage control. Reputation rehab. Desperate meetings behind closed doors. Trying to figure out how to fix what couldn't be fixed. Because you can rebuild departments. You can rebrand websites. But what you can't rebuild? Trust. Me. I landed a new role within 3 weeks. Fully remote. Higher pay. Better benefits. A team that actually respected me as both a professional and a future mom. Funny how life works when you clear out dead weight. But the best part was running into an old coworker from my previous job. She saw me at a coffee shop. Big smile. Big hug. First words out of her mouth? "Girl, Vanessa stays quiet now." We laughed. The beautiful, healed kind of laugh. Because I didn't need revenge to look loud. I didn't need her embarrassed on the news. I didn't need to drag her name. I just needed her to know that her actions didn't break me. They built me. Because here's the thing. Bad bosses forget employees talk. They forget screenshots exist. They forget every shady little off-the-record comment they made in private. Can live forever when you document them right. Vanessa didn't just lose me. She lost her future, her credibility, her carefully crafted women in leadership persona. Not because I fought dirty, but because I fought smart. And nothing feels better than knowing your silence was louder than any speech you could have given. My life after Vanessa? Peaceful, steady, real. Exactly the kind of life I deserved all along. No games, no drama, no fake smiles in meetings. Just real work, real respect, and a real chance to show up as all of me, without hiding any part of my life. My new boss asked me day one about boundaries, asked me what I needed as an expecting mom, made sure I had flexibility, made sure my work was measured by results, not hours logged on Zoom. Wild concept, huh? treating employees like humans. Meanwhile, Vanessa stayed exactly where she put herself. In the past. In the background. In everybody's group chat as girl, you remember Vanessa? Because corporate circles talk. Screenshots travel. Stories live forever. And women like me? We move on. But we don't forget. I heard from a former coworker that Vanessa's career stalled hard. No more speaking gigs. No more women empowerment panels. No more leader in diversity and inclusion posts. Funny how quiet it gets when the truth starts trending. But here's what I learned most from all of it. Never let loyalty become self-betrayal. Never let silence become your cage. Never let a job make you forget your value. Especially as a woman. Especially as a mother. Especially as a human being. Vanessa thought she had power because she had a title. I learned real power isn't about titles. It's about timing. It's about proof. It's about peace. And me. I got the last word without raising my voice. Without being messy. Without losing myself. And every time I look around my new life, every time I log into a Zoom with a team that wants me there, every time I see my growing family, I'm reminded, quiet revenge hits the loudest, especially when it looks like peace. Some people fight dirty. Some people fight loud. Me, I fight clean. With proof. With patience. With peace. Vanessa thought firing me was her power move. Turns out, it was mine. Because she didn't just lose an employee that day. She lost her reputation. Her credibility. Her little girl boss, brand that looked good on LinkedIn, but didn't hold up in real life. She wanted me gone quietly. Wanted me forgotten. Wanted me erased. But here I am. Better job. Better pay. Better life. And her name? Still floating around as a warning. Don't pull a Vanessa. Corporate code for. Don't mess with women who know their rights. Because the truth always outlives the lie. Receipts never expire. And karma never misses a deadline. I didn't destroy Vanessa. She did that herself. I just held up a mirror. Let her see exactly who she really was. And then, I walked away. No drama. No mess. No energy wasted. Just grace. Just peace. Just me, thriving louder than she ever expected. Because the best revenge is building a life you don't have to recover from. And every time I clock into a job that respects me, every time I check my bank account, every time I feel my baby kick, knowing they'll never see me accept less than I deserve, that's my mic drop. That's my ending. And trust me, it's savage.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or
My boss ignored my ideas, so I sold them to a competitor. Let's stick to the plan, okay? That's what my boss, Lauren, told me. Right before she trashed the strategy I'd spent 6 months building. The strategy one knew could save our struggling department. The strategy that, if I'm being honest, would have made her look like a genius. If only she'd listened. But Lauren didn't listen. She never listened. Not to me. Not to anyone who didn't already have a fancy title or an office with a window. Ideas from people like me? Disposable. Forgettable. Dismissed with a smile that felt more like a slap. Cute idea, but not quite what we're looking for. So I stopped talking. Stopped offering. Stopped trying to prove myself to someone who didn't want to see me. And quietly, I started building something else. Something better. Somewhere else. Turns out, my ideas were valuable. Just not to Lauren, but to her biggest competitor, the one she loved to trash in every meeting. They were worth everything. And when I sold them, clean, legal, perfectly executed, Lauren didn't just lose a strategy. She lost clients, revenue, reputation. Because the thing about people like her, they never notice quiet employees. Until we're gone. And by then, it's already too late. My name is Layla, and for the longest time, I really believed hard work spoke for itself. When I landed a strategist role at one of the more competitive marketing agencies in the city, I thought I'd finally found a place I could grow. I was young, eager, and ready to prove myself. I stayed late without being asked. I volunteered for the difficult projects. I took on work that wasn't technically mine because I wanted to be the kind of employee people could rely on. And for a while, I thought that was enough. But working under Lauren? That changed everything I thought I knew about how success worked. Lauren wasn't the worst boss in the world, at least not in the way bad bosses usually show up. She didn't yell. She didn't micromanage every second of my day. If anything, she barely noticed me at all unless she needed something. That was the real problem. Lauren had this way of making you feel like your ideas were only valuable if they came out of her mouth. It didn't matter how hard I worked on a campaign, how much research I brought to the table, or how well a client responded to one of my ideas. If Lauren didn't present it, it didn't count. And if I did try to speak up in meetings, she'd give me that tight, polished smile, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes, and steer the conversation right back to whatever idea she had already decided on. That's interesting, Layla, but let's stick to the plan. It didn't take long before I realized the plan was whatever kept her name on top. I told myself for a long time that maybe I just needed to wait my turn, that if I kept proving myself, eventually someone would notice. But months turned into years, and what I was really starting to notice was that people like Lauren never made room for people like me. Not because I wasn't talented, not because I wasn't ready, but because keeping me small made her feel bigger. And I had finally reached the place where I was done playing small. Before things went sideways with Lauren, I really did love my job. There was something about marketing that just made sense to me. It wasn't just about selling things, it was about solving problems. It was about understanding people, figuring out what mattered to them, and creating something that made them feel seen. I loved that part. I loved working with clients, learning their businesses like they were puzzles waiting to be solved. I loved being able to look at a messy situation and find clarity where nobody else could. For a while, I felt like maybe I'd found my place. Even working under Lauren wasn't terrible at first. She left me alone for the most part. I wasn't on her radar enough to threaten her. And honestly, I was fine with that. I got to do good work quietly. And the clients? They noticed. It's funny. In this industry, clients can always tell who's really doing the work and who's just showing up for the credit. They'd call me directly when things were falling apart. They'd pull me aside after meetings to thank me for being the only one who actually listened. One client even told me, "You're the only reason we're still with this agency." At the time, I thought it was just a compliment. Now, looking back, it was a warning I didn't see coming. There was one project in particular, a huge campaign for a longtime client, where I really thought Lauren might finally see me. I'd stayed up late for weeks crafting this strategy. Something fresh, something bold, something that could genuinely change our results. I poured everything I had into that presentation. When I sent it over to Lauren, I was nervous, but also proud. This was good work. This was smart work. And I genuinely thought, this is the thing that's going to show her what I'm capable of. Instead, she barely glanced at it. She skimmed a few slides, set it aside, and said the words I'd come to absolutely hate. "Cute idea, Layla. But let's stick to the plan." That was the moment I knew. Lauren wasn't interested in new ideas. She was only interested in control. And I had officially outgrown every small little box she kept trying to shove me into. Looking back, I can't even say there was one big moment where Lauren turned into the villain of my story. It was quieter than that. Smaller things, adding up like dust in the corners. Things you don't always notice when you're busy working. Until one day you look around and realize you've been living in a mess for months. The first real red flag showed up in the meetings. I used to get invited to client calls all the time, especially if I'd built the strategy they were paying for. It made sense. I knew the work inside and out. But after I pitched that new campaign, the one she called cute, I noticed my invites started disappearing. Little by little, calls that used to automatically include me were suddenly marked as internal. Meetings I'd usually lead were suddenly being handled by Lauren or one of her new favorite hires. Someone louder, flashier, but with none of the background knowledge. At first, I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she was just trying to streamline things. Maybe I was overthinking. But then came the second red flag. Projects I'd been working on for weeks, sometimes months, started getting reassigned. No explanation. No feedback. Just quietly handed off to someone else. And when I asked about it, Lauren would flash that perfect, patronizing smile and say something like, "I just want you focused on what you're best at." Translation? Stay small. But the moment that sealed it for me was the staff meeting where Lauren stood in front of the entire team, with my campaign strategy printed out in her hands, and pitched it like it was hers. Slide for slide, word for word, every late night, every idea I'd carefully crafted. There it was, presented like it fell out of the sky and into her lap. No mention of me. No credit. Not even eye contact in my direction. I sat there in that room, watching people nod along impressed, and I felt this strange mix of anger and clarity. Lauren didn't just want my ideas. She wanted them without me attached to them. And that was never going to work long term. Not for me. Not anymore. Never again. After that meeting, I stopped trying to prove myself to Lauren. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for credit. I didn't send another carefully worded follow-up email trying to advocate for my work. It was pointless. She'd already decided I was more valuable invisible. Fine, I could do invisible, but not the way she thought. For the next few weeks, I did exactly what she wanted. I stayed quiet. I let her present my ideas like they were hers. I nodded in meetings. I answered emails. I smiled at clients. But underneath all of that, I was building my exit plan. Because the one thing Lauren didn't realize? Clients talk. People notice. Especially when the person who always handled their projects, the one who actually knew their business, suddenly disappears without warning. It started with small things. A client copied me on an email to Lauren that said, "Hey, is Layla still on this project? Just checking. We really appreciated working with her." Lauren ignored it. Of course she did. But the client didn't. 2 days later, I got a LinkedIn message from that same client. Friendly. Casual. But the subtext was loud and clear. "Hope you're doing well, Layla. If you ever go out on your own, keep us in mind." That was the moment everything shifted for me. If Lauren didn't want my ideas? Cool. I'd take them somewhere else. Somewhere I was actually valued. And if her competitors, the firms she loved to trash in meetings, wanted fresh strategy? Wanted results? Wanted someone who could deliver without the politics? Then maybe my next move wasn't just about leaving. Maybe it was about building something better without her. Lauren thought she was silencing me. But all she'd really done was free me. And I was about to turn that freedom into the quietest and most expensive lesson of her career. Once I made the decision to leave, everything about how I moved changed. I didn't rush. I didn't broadcast my plans. Honestly, I didn't tell a soul. Because people like Lauren, they pay attention when you start acting different. They notice when your energy shifts, when you suddenly have boundaries, when you stop chasing approval. I stayed steady, professional, predictable. But behind the scenes, I was building something of my own. The first thing I did was get real clear about what I was worth. Not just in terms of salary, but value. Clients liked working with me not because I had some fancy title, but because I listened. I cared. I made their lives easier without making them feel like an afterthought. That wasn't something Lauren could replicate. That was mine. I started reaching out quietly to a few people I trusted, former colleagues, industry friends, a client contact or two who'd casually dropped hints like, "If you ever leave, let us know." And the response I got? Immediate, warm, direct. "Whatever you're thinking, Layla, we'd love to work with you." It wasn't desperation. It wasn't scheming. It was relationships. Built slowly. Built honestly. Built to last. The second thing I did? Research. I looked at the competitor agencies Lauren loved to tear apart in meetings. She always made them sound incompetent, small. But when I dug into their client work, their reputation, their leadership teams, they weren't small. They were smart. And most importantly, they valued strategy. Real strategy. Not politics. Not ego. Actual results. So while Lauren was busy locking me out of meetings and presenting my work as her own, I was quietly preparing to leave her with nothing but empty PowerPoint slides. Because the thing about people like Lauren, they think control comes from titles, from having their name at the top of an org chart. But real control, real power, comes from people trusting you enough to follow you anywhere. And soon, that's exactly what was about to happen. When I finally gave my notice, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry either. If anything, I felt peaceful. Clear. Because I wasn't walking away from my job in defeat. I was walking away because I had already outgrown every part of it. Especially Lauren. I scheduled a short meeting on a Tuesday morning. Nothing dramatic, nothing with a big bold subject line. Just a quiet little calendar invite labeled, "Quick Chat." She showed up late. Of course she did. Sat down across from me like I was about to ask for a schedule change or a raise she had no intention of approving. "What's up, Layla?" I smiled. "I've accepted another opportunity. My last day will be in 2 weeks." Simple. Calm. Final. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. I could see the wheels turning in her head. Not because she was going to ask how she could keep me, but because people like Lauren only think about one thing. Control. Losing it. She cleared her throat, trying to recover. "Oh, wow. I didn't realize you were looking." Translation. I didn't realize you were brave enough to leave. The conversation after that was forgettable. She asked where I was going. I gave her a vague, professional answer. Nothing personal. Nothing messy. She asked what they could do to retain talent like me. I almost laughed. Talent like me? She had me sitting right here for 3 years. She just never saw me. But the real beauty of that day, it came after word got out, after clients started emailing me directly. Not for gossip, not for drama, but to say one very clear thing. Wherever you go next, Layla, let us know. Because they weren't staying for Lauren's name. They were staying for mine. And now, I was leaving. And I would be taking everything that actually mattered with me. Leaving that company felt less like walking away from a job and more like quietly closing the door on an entire version of myself I had outgrown. And the fallout? It didn't take long. Not because I announced it publicly. Not because I trashed Lauren or exposed anything. But because when someone like me leaves quietly, the silence says everything. The first sign came 2 days after I submitted my notice. A client I'd worked with for years, someone I'd helped through crisis after crisis, sent me a message. Simple. Warm. Congratulations on your next chapter. Please keep us in the loop. We'd love to stay connected. Translation? They weren't planning on sticking around either. Then another client reached out. And another. People I hadn't even expected. Clients I thought might just stay because that's what companies do. They stick with who they know. But the thing about relationships? Real ones. They aren't built on logos. They aren't built on titles. They're built on trust. And trust doesn't transfer just because someone new takes over an account. Lauren didn't understand that, which became painfully obvious when she started sending out transition emails that read more like panic than professionalism. We're so excited to introduce your new account manager. Except clients weren't excited. They were cautious. Quiet. Some didn't respond at all. Some waited a few days and then emailed me directly. Are you open to freelance work? Would love to stay in touch. Let us know where you land. Meanwhile, back at the agency, I heard from a friend that Lauren wasn't exactly handling things gracefully. Apparently, she was frustrated that clients were making things difficult. As if loyalty was supposed to stay tied to the company, not the person who had actually shown up for them day after day. That's when I realized something important. Lauren never lost me because I left. She lost me long before that. The minute she stopped listening. The minute she decided that keeping me small was more important than helping me grow. I wasn't the one scrambling now. I was busy building something better. And she was sitting in her glass office, wondering why nobody was answering her calls. Leaving that agency wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something I should have done a long time ago. Freedom. Control. Work that actually respected what I brought to the table. I didn't leave to prove a point to Lauren. She wasn't my audience anymore. The truth is, once I walked out of that building, I barely thought about her at all. I was too busy. Busy saying yes to projects that aligned with me. Busy saying no to things that didn't. Busy working with people who valued collaboration, not control. And while I was building, Lauren was unraveling. Quietly. Predictably. I started getting messages from former coworkers. Little updates here and there. Nothing dramatic. Just those casual texts that said everything without really saying it. Another client left today. Lauren's losing it. That pitch you built last year? Yeah, they tried to run it without you. It flopped. She's blaming turnover, but we all know what really happened. Meanwhile, I was working with that same competitor Lauren used to mock in meetings. The one she swore could never touch our client list. Funny how quickly things change when you stop talking down about people and actually start doing the work. That competitor? They didn't care that I didn't have some fancy executive title. They cared that I could deliver, that I understood strategy, that clients trusted me enough to follow me out the door. I didn't post about it online, didn't brag, didn't subtweet. I just kept showing up, kept doing good work, kept letting results speak for themselves. Lauren once told me, in this industry, perception is everything. She wasn't wrong, but what she never understood is that perception without proof doesn't last. And me, I didn't need perception. I had relationships, real ones. And that's something no title, no matter how shiny, can ever replace. The real execution didn't happen the day I quit. It happened every single day after, when Lauren kept realizing what she had lost. Not just me, not just my ideas, but everything that came with me. Relationships, trust, stability. The thing about working quietly behind the scenes is that most people don't notice how much you're holding together until you're not there to do it anymore. That's what started happening. Slowly at first. Clients started pulling their contracts. Some went to competitors. Some followed me directly. And others? Well, they just stopped renewing. I wasn't even trying to take anyone. That was never my plan. But good work leaves a trail. Respect leaves a trail. And people remember who actually showed up for them when things were hard. Lauren thought she was untouchable because she was loud. But clients didn't want loud. They wanted results. They wanted someone who listened. They wanted someone who didn't treat their business like a stepping stone for personal glory. And that had always been me. I built my client base slowly, deliberately. No big announcements. No dramatic posts about leaving. Just one conversation at a time. One connection at a time. And in that quiet space, my career started to feel bigger than it ever had inside that agency. Meanwhile, Lauren, she tried to recover, hired new strategists, threw together fresh ideas that were just tired versions of things I'd pitched a year ago. But the problem wasn't the ideas. The problem was always her. Because ideas are easy to copy. Trust isn't. That's what she never understood. People don't stay for PowerPoints. They stay for people. And once you lose their trust, you lose everything. I didn't have to slam a door behind me when I left. It closed just fine on its own. And on the other side was a career built exactly the way I wanted. Without her. Without permission. Without limits. Just me. Finally doing the work I loved. For people who actually saw me. The thing about leaving a place like that? You expect to feel relief. But I didn't just feel relief. I felt like I could finally breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in years, I woke up without that tight feeling in my chest. No dread. No walking on eggshells. No rehearsing how to phrase things so Lauren wouldn't feel threatened. Just peace. Work was still busy, sometimes even busier than before, but it was mine. Mine to choose. Mine to shape. Mine to say yes or no without fear. And that was worth everything. Clients reached out regularly now, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. There was a kind of ease in our conversations I hadn't felt in years. No layers of approval. No corporate jargon. Just honest partnership. We're so glad we found a way to keep working with you, one client told me during a call. And I believed them. Because I felt it too. I built my little consulting business without fanfare. No big announcement posts. No dramatic, I left my toxic job captions. Just steady work. Solid relationships. Quiet wins stacking one after another. And Lauren, I heard things now and then. Nothing dramatic. Just small updates that told me everything I needed to know. Another client left. Another pitch fell apart. Another review that mentioned turnover and lack of strategic direction. I didn't feel angry when I heard those things. I didn't feel smug. If anything, I just felt done. Because when you finally step into a life that fits you, the mess you left behind doesn't feel heavy anymore. It feels distant, irrelevant. I didn't need to win loudly. I didn't need to prove anything. I was busy building a life where my work spoke for itself. Where my ideas didn't have to be filtered through someone else's ego to matter. Where I could show up fully, empathy and all, without apology. Lauren once told me I needed to learn how the industry really worked. Turns out, I did. I just learned it outside her walls. And that lesson? Paid better than any promotion she was never going to give me. Sometimes I wonder if Lauren ever realized what really happened. If she ever sat in that glossy conference room of hers, staring at another lost client report, and wondered how it all slipped away. Because from her perspective, it probably looked like I just left. Like I moved on quietly. No drama. No fight. But what she didn't see was everything I took with me. Not paperwork. Not files. Not her precious presentations. What I took with me couldn't be boxed up or backed up on a server. I took trust. I took relationships. I took every ounce of value she never cared to notice. People like Lauren always think control comes from power. From titles. From sitting at the head of the table. But real control, real power, comes from the way people feel when they work with you. And you can't fake that. You can't steal it. You can't replace it with another loud voice in the room. She thought I was forgettable. Replaceable. Easy to silence. But me? I was never competing with her. I was never fighting for her approval. I was busy building something bigger. Something better. Something she could never touch. And every time I sit down to work, on my terms, in my space, with clients I respect, I'm reminded of exactly who won in the end. Because quiet exits sometimes make the loudest endings.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all.
Chapter 1, The Spotlight. It was supposed to be a team presentation. But there was only one person on stage. Bryce Langford, Director of Strategy, standing under the soft glow of the LED panel like he'd personally discovered electricity. Button blazer, fake humility, hands folded just right. None of this would have been possible without collaboration, he said, smiling at the VPs lined up along the back wall. But I knew if we aligned the vision early and leaned into risk, we could hit targets most teams wouldn't dare attempt. Lies, polished to a shine. The deck on screen? I built it. The prototype he was demoing? My code. My sequence. My architecture. But there wasn't a single mention of my name. Not even in the thank you slide. I stood in the back row, just another face in the crowd, watching my own work float across the screen like a ghost story no one could prove. Tasha was beside me, our desks weren't close, but she knew. She leaned slightly, just enough for me to hear. Didn't you write that demo module? I didn't answer. She already knew. Bryce clicked to the final slide, 3 company logos and the word delivered in bold font. The room applauded. The VP of Operations clapped him on the shoulder afterward. You keep this up, Langford, we're going to have to put you on the acquisition team. Bryce smiled like it was already done. Just trying to build something meaningful. He didn't look my way. Not once. Which was smart. Because if he had, he would have seen it. That flicker in my eyes. The one that always comes right before the lights go out. Chapter 2, Team Effort. It started with a blank slide deck and 3 empty coffee cups. I'd been working on the new client solution for 2 weeks straight, logging out well past midnight, sketching workflows on the back of receipts, building sandbox models in test environments just to keep the data clean. Bryce? He showed up once. Asked for a high-level summary, nodded through my explanation, then told me to make sure it pops visually. Whatever that meant. I built the strategy from the ground up, scoped the project, predicted the pain points, created a pilot phase, and wrote the contingency protocols. I even wrote the onboarding script. Word for word. The night before the pitch, I sent him the finished slides. He responded 2 hours later. Thanks, Jordan. Cleaned it up for executive polish. See you in the morning. I should have known. I opened the version he uploaded to the shared drive. The structure was the same. The flow, untouched. But my speaker notes? Gone. Replaced with generic buzzwords and quotes from business books Bryce had probably never read. He'd even changed the cover slide. Strategic rollout plan, prepared by B. Langford. That was it. My name wasn't listed. Not even in the appendix. I didn't say anything. Not then. Not out loud. I'd spent too many years in places like this to expect fairness. It was always we in private and me in the room. Especially when the real work couldn't be seen from a podium. After the presentation, Bryce stopped by my desk. Good stuff today, he said, smiling like he meant it. You're really growing into someone I can trust. Thanks, I said. I didn't mean it. And neither did he. What he meant was, I'm going to keep using your work until it stops making me look good. What I meant was, I just started documenting everything. Because if this was a team effort, I was done playing for his side. Chapter 3, Shrinking Credits. The internal newsletter went out 2 days later. Project Acceleration, Director Langford leads the charge. I clicked it open like I was peeling off a scab. There it was, Bryce's photo at the top, sleeves rolled up, eyes fixed in that overly staged candid leadership shot. The article quoted him directly. By trusting my gut and aligning cross-functional input, we delivered an aggressive rollout ahead of schedule. I'm proud of the effort my team put in under my guidance. Under his guidance. They spelled my name wrong in the footnote. Jordan. With an O. Not that anyone would have noticed. The mention was buried beneath a paragraph about Bryce's visionary execution style. By lunchtime, the post had been reshared by 3 VPs and liked by the CEO. Someone in HR even updated his internal profile to reflect strategic lead on innovation rollout. Bryce didn't send me the link. Tasha did. She dropped it in Slack with a single message. You good? I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute before typing. Always. But I wasn't. It wasn't just the credit he stole, it was the narrative. The version of events that would now be retold at every performance review, every annual summit, every future hiring round. This is how people get promoted. Not by doing the work, but by editing the story. The worst part? I knew how this would play out. HR would talk about optics. Leadership would say, it's all one team. And if I pushed too hard, I'd be labeled difficult. Ungrateful. Hard to manage. That's how they win. But not this time. This time, I'd let him keep the spotlight. Because while he was busy polishing his own reflection, I was drawing the exit map. One dotted line at a time. Chapter 4, One-on-One. He called it a check-in. I called it a test. Bryce booked it on a Friday, right before close, the kind of time slot meant to make you sweat all weekend. I didn't. I already knew what was coming. The glass-walled conference room felt smaller than usual. He was already seated, sipping some overpriced bottled tea he'd started buying ever since the execs started noticing him. Jordan, he said, all smiles, gesturing to the chair across from him like we were equals. Appreciate you making the time. You scheduled it. He gave a soft laugh, the kind you use when you're trying to seem harmless right before delivering a warning. Look, he said, leaning forward, I know you've been putting in a lot of hours. Heavy lift on that last project. Yeah, I said. I noticed you noticed. He tilted his head, still performing casual. I just want to make sure we're aligned. Sometimes people can get a little territorial about recognition. But the truth is, leadership's about proximity to outcomes. The higher up you are, the more you absorb. Absorb? I asked. It's not personal. That's just how systems work. You're not being erased. You're being positioned. Positioned? Like a pawn. I studied him for a long second. Not to intimidate, just to see how far the delusion went. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You took my strategy, stripped out my notes, presented it under your name, and now you're telling me I should be grateful because I was near it? He didn't blink. You're not the first smart person I've worked with, Jordan. But if you want to grow, you have to learn when to step aside and let someone else open the door. I almost laughed. Because what he didn't realize, what he never could realize, was that I wasn't standing in front of the door anymore. I'd already found another one. I stood up. Calm. Professional. Thanks for the advice, I said. I'll position myself accordingly. And I did. Just not where he expected. Chapter 5, The Turning Point. The next project was supposed to be a reset. New client. Different vertical. Aggressive timeline. The kind of challenge that forced people to tighten up and collaborate. Instead, Bryce treated it like an audition. He opened the kickoff call with a personal story about risk tolerance frameworks and a half-baked metaphor involving Ferraris and market velocity. Everyone smiled and nodded, but you could feel it, the disconnect. Especially the client. They came to us for solutions. Structure. Not storytelling. When the call ended, Bryce clapped me on the back like we were buddies. Solid vibe, right? He said. Just need you to fill in the delivery side. High-level structure. Strategy stuff. Strategy stuff. He meant, do the actual work. Again. I nodded. Got it. And I did. But not like before. This time, I kept every original draft in a private vault. I screen recorded edits. I saved version history with hash signatures. I documented every time I was left off a meeting invite and every email where Bryce referred to my work as executive-ready collateral he'd been nurturing. Nurturing? As if my work were a pet project he'd grown from scratch. I knew the pattern now. He'd lurk until the risk was gone, then swoop in, reword my sentences, throw in a buzz phrase or two, and present the deck as his own, with a fresh blazer and that same plastic smile. And the worst part? He always got away with it. But not this time. Because I wasn't just building a proposal anymore, I was building a trail. I started looping in Tasha when I had questions. Not because she had the answers, but because she saw everything. And I wanted a witness. I thought you already shared that with Bryce, she said one afternoon, scanning a doc I forwarded her directly. I did, I said. Just not this version. She didn't ask. She didn't have to. She knew exactly what I was doing. That's when it clicked. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Let him keep the spotlight. Let him take the next big meeting. Let him stand on the stage and wave to the executives like a conquering hero. Because when it all fell apart, I wanted him standing alone. Chapter 6, Back Channel. Tasha wasn't a gossip. She was smarter than that. Which is why, when she dropped her voice at lunch and said, "You didn't hear this from me," I actually listened. We were sitting outside near the loading dock, the only place in the building that didn't feel like it had eyes. She picked at her salad while pretending not to watch me too closely. "Word is," she said, "Bryce pitched your last project to the CFO like it was a solo effort. Even told them he stayed up nights building the framework from scratch." I blinked. "The one with the 3-phase rollout?" "Yep. Used your exact diagrams. But stripped your name." I didn't even feel angry. Not anymore. Just cold. "Why tell me now?" I asked. She looked me in the eye. "Because people are starting to notice." Apparently, someone in finance flagged inconsistencies in his documentation. Engineering started pushing back on timelines he promised without consulting them. And someone from IT quietly reached out to Tasha to ask if I was still the point of contact on the current project, not because of politics, but because their updates kept stalling in Bryce's inbox. He wasn't just stealing credit anymore. He was bottlenecking it. And people were starting to connect the dots. "He's playing with borrowed time," Tasha said. "Thing is, he doesn't know the clock's already ticking." I nodded. Not because I needed the warning, but because I'd already started the countdown. That night, I went home and organized everything, every draft, every export, every revision log and meeting note. I backed it up to 3 drives, labeled each copy by date, and dropped one in a private folder marked simply, Langford_Fallout. Because when the curtain finally dropped, I wanted the receipts ready. And the audience already watching. Chapter 7, Final Straw. It wasn't the theft. It wasn't the lies, the shrinking credit, or the slow bleed of visibility. It was the shrug. That lazy, dismissive shoulder roll he gave when the client called him out on my work. We were on a joint call with a major client who had finally flagged an error in the project proposal. Not a huge one, a versioning conflict in the delivery scope. A fixable issue, if you understood the framework. Which Bryce didn't. He stumbled through a vague answer, mumbled something about intentional phase iteration, then turned to me with that same old line. "Jordan, why don't you walk them through your section?" My section? The one I hadn't touched in 2 weeks, because Bryce had insisted on streamlining communications and made himself the sole contact for approvals. I did it anyway. Fixed it mid-call. Talked them through the logic. By the time we hung up, they were reassured. Bryce leaned back, grinning like he'd personally saved the deal. "Nice recovery," he said, walking past my desk. "Teamwork wins again." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because if I opened my mouth right then, I wasn't sure what would come out. That was the moment I knew. Not thought. Not suspected. Knew. I was done. Not because I was angry. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I finally realized he wasn't going to stop. Not until he burned through every ounce of my work, my name, my credibility. So I let him. Smiled. Said, "Got it, boss," and went right back to my desk. And I started pulling pieces away. Not publicly. Not dramatically. Just one protocol at a time. One access pass. One unshared password. He had built nothing. And I was about to show him what happened. When the person holding the foundation quietly steps aside. Chapter 8, The Removal Plan. I didn't quit. Not yet. First, I made myself disappear. Internally, I was still present, responding to messages, showing up to meetings, hitting deadlines. Outwardly, nothing changed. But behind the scenes? I was stripping him for parts. I started by pulling my documentation from shared folders. Not all at once, just a few versioning conflicts here and there. A dashboard removed. A tracker archived. Every time I touched a file, I created a mirror copy offline. Timestamped. Tidy. Mine. Next, I cleaned up my inbox. Deleted threads that no longer served me. Archived ones I might need later. Starred every email where Bryce thanked me for running point or taking lead, just enough to trace a pattern. Then I transferred knowledge. Quietly. Strategically. I pinged the junior analysts I trusted and walked them through key systems. Gave them tools. Templates. Left no gaps. When I left, the collapse wouldn't be total, just targeted. Bryce would assume he could step in and handle it. That's the point. Because he couldn't. Not really. He didn't know which dependencies mattered. Which files auto-synced and which ones were manually maintained. He didn't even know where the client audit logs lived. I'd caught him Googling it once, then blamed the intern when it went sideways. I started saying less in meetings. Asking fewer questions. Letting him fill the space. And he did. God, he did. He got louder. Bolder. Started quoting metrics he didn't understand. Promised faster rollouts. Gave exec status updates that weren't just wrong, they were dangerous. I kept a straight face. I let it all pile up. Because people like Bryce don't self-destruct. They perform until the foundation slips. And when it does, they fall fast. Chapter 9, Vanishing Point. I submitted my resignation on a Wednesday morning. Not because it was symbolic. Because that was the day he paid the least attention. I crafted the email the night before. Short. Precise. No adjectives. No gratitude fluff or motivational quotes. Subject, resignation notice. Effective, 2 weeks from today. I will ensure all current responsibilities are transitioned appropriately. Jordan Ellis. I read it twice before hitting send. And then, I breathed. It was the first time in months I'd exhaled without feeling like I owed someone an apology for existing. 10 minutes later, I saw Bryce's name flash across my phone. Then again. Then Slack. Then he appeared at my desk like I'd just canceled Christmas. Jordan, hey, did you send this by mistake? I didn't look up right away. I was finishing a line of code I wouldn't be around to debug. When I finally met his eyes, I said, nope. You're serious? As a heart attack. He blinked a few times, processing. His mouth opened, closed, then reopened with the rehearsed, let's not be impulsive. You've been under pressure. We all have. I tilted my head slightly. Is that what this is? He smiled. One of those tight, forced smiles that doesn't reach the eyes. Come on, man. I've been advocating for you. You're next in line for senior lead. That's funny, I said, clicking save on my final repo update. You told Carla you wrote the deployment framework. He hesitated. I said I structured the delivery model, he muttered. I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. You said I wasn't ready to lead. Those were your exact words. His face shifted. Just a flicker. That moment when someone realizes the rope they've been pulling suddenly goes slack. This is a mistake, he said. People don't leave right when their name's starting to circulate. My name's been circulating for years. You just kept deleting the CC line. He looked around, like the walls might back him up. You're angry. No, I said. I'm just done. HR booked my exit interview for the same afternoon. The woman across from me had a clipboard, a soft voice, and the kind of professionally trained detachment that made me want to lie just to see if she'd flinch. So, Jordan, she said. Any feedback you'd like to give about your experience working under Director Langford? I smiled. I could have said 1,000 things. Could have described the meetings he uninvited me from, the client notes he accidentally deleted from the slide deck, the time he scheduled a leadership lunch and told everyone I had a scheduling conflict. When he'd never even asked. Instead, I said, no. I'm sure the results will speak for themselves. She made a note. Didn't press. She knew. Or she would soon. My last day was a Friday. I wore jeans. Packed my things slowly. No one came by my desk except for Tasha, who handed me a coffee and said, "It's gonna get real loud after you leave." I nodded. Good. No big send-off? She asked. No balloons. No cupcakes. No recycled farewell cards signed with fake gratitude. She smirked. Savage. No, I said. Strategic. I walked out alone. No one stopped me. No one called after me. I didn't even badge out, they'd already deactivated my access before lunch. That's what companies do when you stop being useful to the wrong people. But that's the thing about becoming invisible. You learn how to move without being seen. And when you finally step out, they never see you coming back. Chapter 10, The Spiral. It took exactly 9 business days. That's how long it took for the silence I left behind to turn into noise. At first, it was small. Tasha sent me a message on Signal, not Slack, not text. She knew better. Client brief for the Langford rollout came back with red lines. Lots of them. Heard Carla wasn't happy. I didn't reply. A day later, another ping. Your permissions were never replaced. Bryce is scrambling to find the original data structure. I smiled. See, I hadn't sabotaged anything. I didn't delete files or set traps or salt the database. I just didn't leave him a map. He assumed everything I did could be recreated with a quick meeting and a junior analyst. But the truth is, I was the reason the chaos never reached his inbox. I was the one smoothing the edges, closing loops, translating tech into business speak before it made him look out of his depth. And now? There was no buffer. No translator. Just Bryce, and the mess he never realized he couldn't control. I started hearing things from other directions. A recruiter I knew called to say one of their mutual clients had reached out for help. Apparently, the product integration fell apart at the leadership level. Translation: Bryce overpromised, underdelivered, and couldn't explain why. Another ex-coworker forwarded me an internal memo. We appreciate your patience during this transition. We are currently reviewing internal project documentation and restructuring key leadership roles. Restructuring. That word does a lot of heavy lifting in corporate speak. It means someone's about to get walked out quietly. Someone who made just enough noise to get noticed. But not enough to get protected. Tasha confirmed it by week 3. Langford's been pulled from the next rollout. Carla's reviewing email history. It's getting ugly. I didn't ask for details. Because I already knew how it ends when you build your career on other people's work. Eventually, the work leaves. And all that's left is the spotlight. Too bright. Too hot. And aimed at all the wrong things. Chapter 11, Behind Closed Doors. No one announced it. There was no all-hands meeting, no calendar block titled Accountability Review. Just a quiet reshuffling of office traffic, a subtle ripple in the hallway routine. Tasha sent me a one-line message that morning. He just got called upstairs. He, of course, was Bryce. And upstairs meant Carla Denning's office, the glass corner room where only two kinds of conversations happen: promotions and consequences. This wasn't a promotion. From what I heard later, Bryce walked in with a printed copy of a Q3 report and that same self-assured lean he always used to open meetings, like the weight of his own ego could knock a door down. Carla didn't stand. She didn't offer coffee. She just gestured to the chair across from her and opened a folder with a red tab at the top. Inside, a timeline. Email chains. Presentation edits. Slack exports. Version histories. The entire audit trail of a man who had built his title on someone else's work. Mine. At first, Bryce tried to spin it. Said the team was fragmented, that he empowered contributors to work independently, which is why his name appeared on everything. But then she pulled up a draft, one of the originals I'd shared with him, with metadata and timestamps showing he'd replaced the author tag and deleted my notes before uploading the final version to the client portal. She didn't say anything. Just let the silence settle between them like a verdict. Look, he said finally, hands clasped in front of him, we hit the targets, didn't we? The client signed off. That's what matters. No, she said. What matters is integrity. And chain of custody. He didn't have a response for that. Later, someone from HR walked past the elevators and saw him sitting alone in the lobby. No phone. No laptop. Just a man staring at his reflection in the marble floor, finally realizing he might not survive without a mirror to steal from. By the end of the week, his bio was removed from the company site. Official statement? Director Langford has chosen to pursue new opportunities outside the organization. But everyone knew. Because behind closed doors, the truth always finds its voice. Chapter 12, The Receipts. They didn't call me. They didn't have to. I wasn't interested in being a witness, I'd already played that role. Quiet. Convenient. Erasable. But the folder I left behind? That was louder than I ever could have been. See, I didn't just document everything for my own protection. I curated it. Labeled it. Left it where the right people would find it when things went sideways. And they did. Carla's assistant, sharp, organized, probably 3 steps ahead of everyone in that building, found the folder in the shared drive. It was buried beneath a benign label. Client_timeline_archive_final. No drama. No fireworks. Just timestamps, edit trails, call summaries, slide comparisons. Lined up like dominoes. All pointing to the same pattern. I built it. He polished it. He signed it. He took credit. There were Slack messages with him asking me to reword the technicals so they sound more like me. Emails where he forwarded client feedback with good work, but never included me in the response thread. Even calendar invites showing meetings I was mysteriously removed from. After I shared my pre-reads. They had everything. And once they saw it, really saw it, the conversation shifted. From how did this happen? To who else knew? Turns out, I wasn't the only one Bryce had stepped on. There were junior analysts, interns, even a contractor from the DevOps side who'd raised concerns months ago, and been conveniently phased out. The receipts cracked the dam wide open. People started coming forward. Quietly. Carefully. Sharing what they'd buried just to keep their jobs. And once Carla had the full picture? She moved quickly. No debate. No appeals. Bryce didn't even get an exit meeting. Just a message from HR to check his personal items at the front desk. By the time the next company update went out, a new interim director was in place. And every file that used to have his initials in the corner now had space for someone else's. Chapter 13, Collapse. By the time they cleaned up the mess, Bryce was already off the grid. No LinkedIn post. No farewell email. Just gone. HR never used the word fired. They never do. But the whispers said enough. His company laptop was returned blank. Badge access terminated. And his name, once peppered across every project, was quietly scrubbed from internal documentation. The people who used to quote him stopped saying his name. The ones who laughed at his jokes started looking over their shoulders. That's the thing about people like Bryce. Their power only exists as long as no one checks the foundation. And once someone does, the whole thing comes down like it was built on sand. Tasha told me the new interim lead brought in an outside consultant to audit remaining systems. Half the workflows were incomplete. Documents without context. Slide decks without source data. The entire infrastructure had depended on me, on someone who was never supposed to matter. They're still untangling it. Last I heard, they split the project team into 2 groups, salvage and rebuild. And Bryce? He resurfaced 3 weeks later. Someone forwarded me a post from a startup networking forum, a blurry profile photo, half a pitch, and the usual recycled buzzwords. Former Director of Strategic Growth. Looking to partner on next big opportunity. Open to consulting roles. No comments. No likes. Just a post, floating in silence. I didn't reply. Didn't block him either. Let it sit. Let it echo. Because when you build your career off other people's brilliance, you don't just lose your job when they leave. You lose your credibility. And once that's gone, there's nothing left to take. Chapter 14, Redirection. The email came on a Tuesday. Subject line: checking in, potential opportunity? It was from Carla. Polite. Professional. Non-committal on the surface, but I knew the subtext. We're in the process of reevaluating key leadership roles and wanted to touch base. I'd be happy to schedule a conversation if you're open to returning in a senior capacity. That's how they say we chose wrong without actually saying it. I read it twice before closing the tab. No anger. No smugness. Just clarity. By then, I was 3 weeks into something new. A boutique firm. Leaner. Smarter. One where people didn't treat silence as a weakness and team effort actually meant shared credit. I was sleeping again. Eating again. My ideas weren't filtered through someone else's brand of ego. My name was on every proposal I touched, and when I led a project, people knew it. I didn't reply to Carla right away. A part of me wanted to. Not for the job. For the symmetry. For the satisfaction of returning on my terms. But then I remembered the look on Bryce's face in that final meeting, the slow dawning panic of a man who realized he couldn't do what he claimed to. I didn't need to prove anything. The silence I left behind did it for me. A few days later, I wrote back. Appreciate you reaching out. I'm grateful for the experience, but I've found the right fit elsewhere. Wishing you the best with the transition. Jordan Ellis. No bitterness. No grudge. Just a closed loop. Not every return has to be a victory lap. Sometimes the best move is the one they never see you take. Epilogue, credit restored. The panel wasn't huge. Just a regional tech leadership event at a co-working space downtown, open bar, name tags, recycled lanyards. The kind of event you go to for connections, not headlines. I was invited to speak on sustainable growth and client trust. Nothing flashy. Just 30 minutes, a few slides, and an open conda. But when I stepped up to the mic, something shifted. People listened. Not because I shouted. Not because I talked fast or threw around big titles. But because the work stood on its own. Afterward, a few people approached. One mentioned a quote I'd used. Another said my rollout framework sounded familiar, they'd seen a variation of it years ago and didn't know where it originated. I smiled. That was me, I said. And this time, no one questioned it. Then, just before I left, I saw him. Bryce. In the back of the room. Hair shorter. Shirt untucked. No badge. Just standing there, hands in his pockets, pretending not to make eye contact. He didn't approach. Didn't wave. He didn't have to. He heard everything. I walked past him on the way out. He turned slightly, maybe to say something, maybe just to acknowledge what he already knew. But I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say. Because the credit he tried to bury had already found its way home. And this time, it had my name on it.
Thanks so much for watching. If you love a good revenge story, or if you've ever dreamed of getting the last word without saying much at all,
Some lessons come with severance. If this compilation gave you life, hit like, drop a comment, and share it with someone who's ever said, it's just work. And don't forget, at Savage Endings, the best payback happens in broad daylight. See you in the next meltdown.